This is the Women of Wonder podcast, where we help women tap into their superpowers. Welcome to the Women of Wonder podcast with our special guest today, Madeline Pryor. So excited to have you here and learn more about your world. So thank you for joining us and for being here today.
Thank you, Carly. It is so good to be here, and I'm really stoked to have this conversation with you.
So I feel like we created a little bit of mystery around you, and we have been launching this episode. And I would love for you to share a little bit about the work that you do and introduce us to this world of erotic intelligence.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I think that's apropos that there's a little mystery around this work. This is certainly a space in which there is some mystery intentionally. And I think the way I've been defining what I do, and it is ever changing, it's very dynamic, but I hinge everything that I do around erotic intelligence. And so that looks like intimacy coaching, embodiment training. There's some practical aspects of it that include both Tantra, BDSM, relational intelligence, somatic intelligence. And so it really is this all-encompassing sacred sexual healing practice that has many, many different modalities and lineages that have comprised it over time. And so that's why I say it's dynamic and constantly changing, because I go to a new training, I read a new book, I meet a new teacher, and that person, that philosophy, that experience then gets mixed in and intermingled with my work. And so it really is this living, breathing practice that, will never be the same twice.
Beautiful. So for people that maybe are completely new to this world, and because you've just shared maybe a lot of new terminology for some, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Let's be clear. Yeah, I think the practice itself looks different person by person, but the tenets are always the same. And so there's some foundational thinking that goes into everything I do, which is, as humans, we are the happiest, the most fulfilled when we are connected to our bodies and connected to each other. And over our lifetimes, and previous lifetimes, if we want to go into that space as well, we accumulate experiences, conditioning, maybe blockages, maybe we experience traumas or wounds that either inhibit or change the way that we're able to connect with other people, or that we're able to connect with our own bodies. And so this work is really centered around clearing those blockages and enabling us to better, more freely, more openly express ourselves and connect with one another. And terms like Tantra and BDSM and even intimacy coaching, relational intelligence, these are all tools that I carry in my particular toolkit. Another practitioner's toolkit is going to look a little different, but those are tools in mine that I use in order to facilitate the opportunities to heal. And that's something I really hone in on as well, as I say opportunities to heal, because it really is self-healing. As your practitioner, your facilitator, my job is to hold space in which you can actually heal yourself. And so I like to remind my clients, the people I speak to about this work, I facilitate, that you are empowered to do this work for yourself. And if you do choose to work with a facilitator, it's the job of that individual or several individuals to hold that space, to teach you what they know, and to really embolden and encourage you to do the self-healing work.
Incredible. And as someone who has experienced your work, I can certainly say that it was transformative and something that I wasn't really sure what I was walking into, but it's left an impact on my life. So I'm very grateful for you and the fact that you're bringing this work into the world. And I'm also very curious, how did you get started in this? Like, what was the motivation?
Absolutely. And That's a question I get asked a lot, especially from people who know me or knew me to be an entrepreneur and the founder of a marketing agency. That's where I got my, I guess, career start in my 20s. And so for many, it seems like a big shift to move from one to the other. And it was a big shift. It was a big identity shift as well as a, technical career shift. And I got my start out of a need. I had a personal need for this work. And I was in my late 20s and cohabitating with a partner and experiencing what I will call like a complete drought of desire, complete drought of sexual energy. And it was very atypical for me to experience that. I have been a relatively sexual and embodied teen and, early adult, young adult. And it was almost as if someone flipped off a light switch. And it felt very sudden. It was super disruptive to my relationship. And I was fairly convinced that there was something physically wrong with me. That was, that's where your mind goes, right? Is like you immediately blame your body. You're like, something must be amiss, something must be disconnected. And Western medicine did not give me much. And I went to, my gynecologist. I went to my doctor. What's going on? And everyone says you're fine. And so I really came to this work in a bit of a struggle personally and in some level of desperation. And that's when I found my teacher. And she was the first person to introduce the idea to me that the issue I was experiencing could be energetic. And it could be a block that is related to, what's going on with me personally, emotionally, and energetically. And it was about 6 months of working really intently with her that I went from having almost no sensation in my body to feeling like myself again, and then superseding that, and then feeling more
Wow.
sensation than I'd ever felt in my life. And it was a mix of her tutelage and practices and hands-on work with her that really was that magic combination that got me back in my body, back to myself. And so that
Love that.
started, yeah, that started the interest. And it is very much my nature to dive off the deep end when I find something fascinating. And I did. I studied, I read, everything I could read. I took the trainings, I dove in head first. And it was years before I realized that this was meant to be my work. I thought from several years that this was meant to be a personal practice, then maybe a hobby, then maybe a deep fascination. And it really evolved organically into the thing that I want to do and teach and offer all the time.
And the fact that you experienced that, in your late 20s, when, I hear people express that regularly. They've been in partnership for 10, 20 years, and they're experiencing some level of disconnection or that drought or loss of libido, and hear a lot that they blame themselves and maybe their age or where they're at in their life. What has that experience been like for you to work with others and to help them through that time period?
Yeah, yeah, what a great question. And I'll also add one into the mix. Sometimes they also blame their partners, right? And it then becomes the fault of the relationship. This isn't the right relationship. If it was, I would feel X, Y, or Z. And so I think, especially in working with couples, but individuals as well, who are having that experience of loss of desire, really loss of eros, which we can talk more about. There are things you can do, practices you can do, and ways that you can start to habitually change your life in order to open up space for desire, for eros, for erotic healing that maybe aren't so readily accessible in the mainstream. And so I, I consider myself a bit of a, sacred rebel when it comes to this work because our erotic health is deeply neglected in the broader conversation. And it's certainly something that not only is an indicator of our energetic, emotional, physical health, but it's also contributory to that health. It is part of the health system in our bodies. And so I really make it my mission to not only illuminate that, but help people realize and understand that a loss of desire, a loss of eros, a loss of sensation even is not a lifelong sentence. It is something that you can resensitize, come out of, approach with curiosity in a way that will allow you to move through it as you would move through any physical, physical embodied block.
So the work that you're doing, like I know that there's probably a wide range, as you shared, of what that actually looks like in practice. But can you give us an example of something that you would do to support someone working on resensitizing or reconnecting with themselves? Like what's the actual like practical application of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll approach it from three angles because someone who's really diving into what I consider sort of the core competency of my work is usually getting three things. One, they're getting some level of intimacy and embodiment coaching. So talking through, offering some philosophy, some tantric theory, maybe and giving some level of connection and also some education around what their experience is. The second piece is practical exercises. So breathing exercises. I mean, again, the library is deep and wide. And
Yes.
so some level of actual practical, I can take this home type exercises. And then there's more hands-on work. And for someone who's resensitizing, we're going to do a lot of work with touch and massage. And what I have found and what I've been taught rather is that we are indoctrinated in our culture to some specific kinds of touch. The spectrum of touch, which is actually very, very wide, is really underutilized in our society. And so there are all types of touch that we're not experiencing. And by bringing some of that back in, we get to learn a bit more about our bodies. And so an example being, let's say I'm working with a woman who's in a relationship. It's like, I feel completely numb to the touch of my partner. I don't feel activated by it. I don't desire it. I feel guilty for not desiring it. There's a whole host of accompanying emotions that go alongside that. And what I might start exploring with that client, with that woman, is, are you being touched in the way that you want to be touched? Are there other ways that we can approach physical touch that might be more activating, enjoyable, soothing, calming, safety inducing? What we often get into the habit of, especially in long-term relationships, is a bit of a utilitarian loop, right? Like, like we kiss like this for affection. We touch like this to indicate that we want to have sex. And so we start missing out on the very dynamic way in which we want to touch and we want to be touched. Touch is the language of the body, right? What if you were only using 50 words in your vernacular?
Right.
It would be so limited and the conversation would be so boring.
Yes.
And so by opening up and creating more creativity, more versatility in the way that we touch, we might open up more opportunity for turn on, more opportunity for sensation that you didn't know existed or you didn't know was activating. And so that's always a good place to start. It's like, lay the baseline, what's going on in the intimacy landscape. Here are some practices, breathing, self-touch, self-pleasure that can start to get your body activated. on your own or on a more daily habitual basis. And then as an energy worker, as a practitioner, I can bring in like a little extra wattage to start to see like, okay, what does your body respond to? What's the energetic makeup? Where are you blocked? Where are you numb? When I touch you here, what does that feel like? Do you feel like you want to move away or do you feel like you want to lean into it? Let's explore that. Why is that happening? Let's get curious. And so that is, I think, a really potent space. It can also be a bit of a taboo space, right? Like
Right.
getting hands-on work done for the purpose of activating the erotic is a little bit edgy, right? Like many of
Yeah.
us, we go into a massage, that's probably the closest we get to being
Right.
touched in a way that feels therapeutic, but also not sexual. And so it's a space that I think requires education and a bit of an open mind.
Well, you're certainly helping us do that by, sharing these insights. And when you're speaking about this, this level of work and these types of exercises that you might do, like I do see that very like sensual side. And you mention BDSM. And I
Yes.
think for many people, maybe they have like a glimpse into what that means, but maybe not how it would connect to this work. So I would love for you to describe how you incorporate BDSM and what that really means.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked it. That is, I would say that BDSM is probably my passion of the moment because it is the newest part of my practice. And it's also the part of my practice that makes people's eyes go, what? What? When I decided to study BDSM, many people who are familiar with my practice asked me why. How how does this link up? I don't understand where the connection point is. And I'll start by saying this. In the same way that Tantra is a tool or a functioning mechanism of my practice, I really think about BDSM the same way. And I've said to many people, it's Tantra with the wattage turn up. It's extra heat. And it came into my practice really organically. I found that some people I was working on they needed some extra to like move their systems, to move a block, to create a catharsis that was so begging to happen. And so I came to it because I felt enough of a need from the clients I was working on that I realized I had to get trained, right? And it's very important if you are going to work with a BDSM practitioner or a Dom that that person has received training because we're working with big energies, we're working with shadow, we're working with some level of physicality usually. And so that was the impetus. I scampered off and got trained by someone who was also really versed in the tantric arts. And so someone who was really aware of the energetics, who did consider BDSM a part of sacred spirituality. And what that has manifested as in my practice is bringing in some of these edgier techniques, bringing in bondage, bringing in shibari, bringing in impact play, and using it as a therapeutic tool to again get to an end goal, whether that be sensitizing the body, working through trauma, eradicating shame around sexual desires, maybe that felt taboo, whatever the application is, once again, BDSM is a tool. And the reason I say that it's sort of my passion of the moment is because it's so taboo. It's because of that image that we have in our minds of the leather clad, latex clad
Yes.
dominatrix with a whip, which like
Yes.
sometimes I am. Sometimes I
Sometimes
am.
you are.
And that is sometimes that's the tool. But there is so much more to the practice and to the work than that. And the way that I personally use BDSM is as a therapeutic practice.
So even when you say Dom, like I imagine mostly, like in my mind, mostly a woman with a man. How does it apply to women that you work with? Like, what's that relationship like and how you've worked with them?
I mean, similar and different, and I'll tell you a little bit about both. When I got my training, in particularly in BDSM, I was in a training with 22 other women. And
Oh,
so we all were training together, but we all also only worked on each other. And so when I first started this work, I was fairly convinced that I was only going to work with women. And now I work with women and men and couples, and I've opened my practice up. But I started by learning on and with women's bodies. And there's a beautiful aspect to that I didn't even really understand about my own body until doing this training, which is women's bodies or fem bodies. Anyone who really wants to be in the expression of the feminine, right? In the expression of Shakti, in the expression of free flowing life force energy, requires the opposite energetic, which is the masculine Shiva. It's the holding energy. And so women often are craving containment, are craving the masculine, however you want to typify it, are craving that strong hold in order to feel fully expressed in the feminine expression. And we're often seeking that in male partners if we're, speaking heteronormatively, but we're also seeking that out in the world anytime that we want to be in expression. And so there's a practice called containment, which is actually like acting as the masculine holding, acting as the container that women are craving a lot of the time. I want to say all the time,
yeah.
kind of. And it's not something that we often receive out in the world. We don't know that we even really need it, but we are inherently in our very nature seeking it. And so working with women has a particular, it makes sense because of that desire to be held. And a key energetic of being a Dom is holding that container. That's like the main job. All the other pieces of like certain actions, a tone of voice, a way of dressing, a way of presenting, those are just the accoutrement, the dressing, the style, where the key energetics are really about two things. One, containment and holding, creating safety in the body of another, which is the best way to create the opportunities to surrender, and the ability to put your attention out on another person. That is the key energetic of doming, is attention out. So whether I'm doming a woman or a man or a group of people that I'm teaching or a team that I'm leading, the key energetic is taking my attention out of my own self-consciousness, out of my own internal experience and all the little voices that might be contributing to that. And it's putting it out on the person in front of me and keying into the minutia of their experience. And women love that.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Right? Like
Yeah.
it's, as women, we are craving that. And it's a really natural part of my practice to work with women for that reason.
What have you learned about yourself by doing that work?
I want to say everything,
Yes.
and I'll elaborate, but I did not, when I started the training, I had dabbled um personally in kinky things and kinky activities and kinky expressions, but never in a really deep or consistent way. And by diving into this work, I learned that there was a lot of shadow left to be alchemized. There was a lot of little behavioral patterns, things that I would avoid or things that I would unconsciously move towards that I was not aware of until I really shine the light on that. And that's part of personal development and self-work, right? Is illuminating those spaces. But the beauty of both my tantric training and my BDSM training is that it gave me the tools to then either remove those blocks and work through those blocks and release some of that old stuff, or go back into it, reenact it even, which is very, very
Wow.
edgy, very wild stuff. But by reenacting it, alleviating the pressure that it was creating in my system, and maybe even alleviating the part of me that felt the need to go back and reenact it IRL, right? I would much rather reenact it in the safe dungeon than I want to unconsciously reenact something that was difficult or traumatic in my life. And so it really gave this safe space to look at those things and then work with them in whatever way they wanted to be worked with.
So we love to ask people on this podcast what they think that their superpowers are. And I'm so curious what you would describe for yourself.
That is a great question. I think there are two things that come to mind for me. One is something that I used to really hate about myself that now has, in this new expression, really been such a benefit, which is I have always carried a bit of a penetrating energy. Since I was very young, you felt me walk into the room. I was loud and rambunctious and very alive, very expressed. And there's certainly a time in my life around the time I think where you gain self-consciousness that I felt ashamed of that. I certainly got slapped on the wrist for that as a child in school and occasionally at home, though my parents really did support me in my full wild expression. And I really started to carry shame around that, especially in my late teens, early 20s, where you start to really see yourself in the mirror. And it took many years to embrace that part of myself, to embrace the fact that I do have a lot of charge. I do carry a big energy.
Yeah.
You really love the bull in the china shop that lives inside me.
Yes.
And
Beautiful.
yeah, thank you. And now it plays such a role, right? Now that extra wattage, that extra intensity that comes out in, in a dominant expression, that comes out as a powerful tantric practitioner, it has a place to channel, and it can channel it right into someone else, right into someone else's experience. And in that way, it has found its home. And so it's been really a relief, honestly, to find alignment. And now this thing that I was always kind of like, what about myself has a purpose, a good purpose. I think that's the one.
That's a great one. And the fact that you can then also see how that's supported your work and you can bring that forward. And how do you see that evolving? Like, what's that next layer, next level that
Hmm.
you see yourself working towards these days?
Yeah, great question. Where I'd like to see this go after several years of really focusing on my one-to-one practice or one to two, if it's a couple, I feel ready to start to take this out and take this work into a more scalable expression. I taught recently, I taught a retreat upstate and had, 25 or 30 couples who were all doing versions of this work, doing deep, tantric connective, intimacy building, desire building work at a professional retreat. And there was something really activating about that. Many of the people had never done tantric work before. Many of the people were new to anything in the intimacy, desire building, sexy space. And it lit me up to start to put curriculum together, to start to teach more, facilitate more, and bring this to its next level of expression in the world. And I really feel excited by that. And I think what I just described of this like big energy, that's the next place it wants to go. It's ready to like billow out into into a bigger arena. And so I feel lit up to take that to the next space.
So if someone's listening here and they cannot wait to reach out and work with you in some capacity, what does that look like? Like, how can they
Ah,
connect with you?
thank you. That looks right now like going to my website, and there is a form that you fill out. And it's right now, there's a mixture of offerings. And so by getting on my mailing list, you get activated to learn more about the one-to-one practice. I have workshops, especially in New York and LA, that's sort of primary, but we sprinkle them around. And that's the main modality right now. What I'm hoping, and I'll give a little teaser,
Ooh, okay.
hoping is to launch my first course in the fall that will look like a live, in real time learning opportunity that I think will span over about 7 or 8 weeks and will bring a lot of this work into one place. And so I think it will be a multi-modality experience of erotic healing and also versing yourself with erotic intelligence. So what are the tenets of having a more erotically expressed life as an individual, as a couple, as a, anyone, anytime? That is really what feels like the main mission right now, is bringing more erotic availability and expression into people's worlds.
Well, I mean, I'm here for it, so I can't wait to see who else is. And anything else that you want to add, that you want to leave us with, that you haven't shared yet today?
Hmm. Something is feeling really present for me right now, and it's based on a conversation I had with a friend this week who is a new mom, just had her first child. And I've known this woman for many, many years. And we had a conversation about her erotic expression and where she is feeling um, a lack and where she wants to feel more. And in that conversation, she was like, "You're the only person I can talk to about this. You're the only person I would share this with." And it really struck me the way that we feel a need to hide or a need to sort of cover up this part of ourselves, whether we're fully wildly expressed and we're like, woo, can't show that, or we're feeling a little bit lost. And so I think what feels present for me today is the encouragement for all of us, women and men and communities, to be more open, more courageous in bringing this idea of erotic health into the zeitgeist, into the conversation in ways that feel supportive and comfortable. It breaks my heart that a friend would be having an experience like that and not feel like there's a supportive container to talk about it. And I think a lot of people feel that way. A lot of my clients feel that way. A lot of people who come to me say, "I've never shared this with anyone." And I'm happy to be that person. I'm honored to be that person. And I think that we can all be that person a little more often.
And so glad that you brought up moms too. There's a lot of new moms in our community, a lot of moms that have been through, many phases of changes in their bodies, their libido, and even people that are contemplating becoming moms. And this is actually a very scary part of it, is like, I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to disconnect myself to such a degree that, I'd have to spend multiple years without this excitement in my life. So the fact that you know, you're seeing that, and then also nudging us to talk about it more with each other, I think is a very yeah, very helpful idea, and something that I would love. I know Nisha, the co-founder in Women of Wonder, that's something we talk about all the time. So good
Mhm.
reminder to
Yeah.
not shy away from it and bring it out more often.
I mean, big support for the mamas. And I think it's,
Hmm.
it's the phase that we're both in where we have friends and many, many women in our lives who are experiencing motherhood in any given stage. And so I feel a particular like deep love and support and ferocity for that group and for that experience of womanhood is like we can maintain our erotic selves through this experience, and we have flexibility knowing that there will be shifts and changes. So how fluid and flexible and available can we be to the dynamic nature of that experience? And
Thank you. It's
it takes a
huge.
village. It takes a
Yes.
village.
Yeah, well, we're here for that for sure, and cannot thank you enough for sharing your work, your story, and this exciting realm of possibility for people to explore with you, with themselves, with others. So really glad that you could be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carly. I had a blast.